if our faith is weak, God help our unbelief.
So we're going to run a clip about giving, and I love this. I have watched this so many times, and I can't wait for you guys to see it, because this is the heart of a cheerful giver.
Amen. This is your day. 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 Amen. Day of the Lord. Amen. Day of the Lord. Amen. This is your day. Amen. This is your day. Amen. This is your day. Amen. Day of the Lord. Amen. Day of the Lord. Amen. This is your time. This is your time. This is your time. Time of the Lord. Amen. Time of the Lord. Amen. This is my day. It is my day. This is my day. The day of the Lord. Somebody, this is your day of the Lord. The day of the Lord. This is my day. This is my day. This is my day. The day of the Lord. The day of the Lord. This is my time. This is your time. This is your time.
So listen, when you come before the Lord to give, that is how you do it. Now, we don't pass an offering plate, and we don't have offerings up here, but we have offering boxes by each door. And listen, when you go to give to God, you just dance right out that box and put that in there, because that is a privilege. It is a privilege. God has provided for you so that you can give back to Him. And that's a privilege and an honor. And so I just love that. That is the perfect example of a cheerful giver. So we're going to dig into some scriptures. We have about 8, and we have them on the screen. And I have them on my paper because I knew I wouldn't be able to manage flipping around and staying focused too. So we're going to go to Malachi 3, chapter 3, verse 10. Malachi 3:10. And it's the scripture that says, "Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be found food in my house. And try me now in this, says the Lord of hosts. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it." Okay? So this is one of the only times in the Bible that God tells us to try Him, test Him, or prove Him, is in this scripture. Now, there are other times in the Bible that there are similar words, similar language used, and I believe that we should take advantage of all of those opportunities if God tells us to. It's not a law, though. It's not legalism. You are not bound to tithe. We live under grace. We live under the New Testament. And so we are not bound by the law any longer, okay? So we're not saying that if you don't give your 10%, you're going to go to hell. God's not going to move in your life. None of that. But what we are saying is that God put the scripture there, and if we choose to apply it and make it applicable to our lives, I believe that He is faithful and He will do what He has promised. He said, "I will not see if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it." He will overwhelm you with blessings. And I have seen it time and time and time again in my own life. I have been so overwhelmed by what God has chosen to do in my life. But I was happy to give. I was happy to do it. And the reward in just the giving was more than enough. But God still was faithful to do abundantly, even more than just that. So I just want to share that most people consider the storehouse in Malachi to be the local church where you worship. Brian and I personally choose to tithe to the church, and we have offerings that we give to other ministries beyond Lighthouse Church and to individuals, and as God speaks to us and inspires us and moves us. But giving, specifically tithing, is really important because it softens your heart. It does. It softens your heart, and it frees your soul from dependence on money. When you're able to freely let go, then that means that your heart is softened and you're free from the dependence on money. And you never walk away from giving feeling bad. That never happens. It's amazing. And so you can confidently give of your time, your talents, even things you don't need anymore. Those things are all things that you can give, and they're valuable. But giving of your money, of your income, is going to have the most impact on your finances. And if you'll bear with me, I'll explain why, okay? Do you remember when Brian taught on fasting a few weeks ago? And he taught that some people like to fast from screen time, from video games, and things like that. But biblical fasting always involved food. Okay? And it's good to fast from those other things. It's important, and it will definitely enhance your fasting experience if you're spending the time that you would normally spend watching TV, if you're spending it reading God's Word. But biblical fasting did involve food. Well, so does tithing. Tithing involves money. So we can give of all these other areas and all these other things in our lives, and it's good to do that. But when we talk about tithe, we're talking about money. Okay? So, let's start with some basics. What is a tithe? Simply put, a tithe is a word, an Old Testament word for 10%. 10% of your income. So what's the difference between tithes and offerings? A tithe is an amount, it's a percentage of your income, and an offering is anything above that, okay? It doesn't take the place of your tithe, but it's beyond your percentage, whatever percentage you have decided on with God. But tithe literally means 10%, okay? So we're going to talk about the benefits of giving. So let's look at Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24. It says, "There is one who scatters yet increases more, and there is one who withholds more than is right, but it leads to poverty." So when we say there is one that scattereth and yet increaseth, it's a really poetic way, because the Bible's very poetic. I mean, when you really dig into the words and how it's written, and, it was, the King James version was translated during the time that Shakespeare was an author in writing. And so if you've ever read Shakespeare, it's challenging, but it's very poetic and very beautiful. And so is the Bible. So that just simply means whenever we say one that scattereth and yet increaseth, it's a really poetic way to say someone who gives to the poor, who is blessed by the Lord, and his belongings are multiplied. So if you can imagine when you go out and feed the chickens and you scatter, and the chickens all run around and eat. So the person that's doing the scattering, the giving, is the one who's going to be multiplied and be blessed. So one who withholds more than right is someone who doesn't give and who only looks after himself. And the Bible tells us that it leads to poverty. Wow, that's profound. So the tithe was not put in place for God's benefit, because he already has everything he needs. Did you know that? He doesn't need your money. He doesn't. He's God. Tithing was created for our benefit. It teaches us how to keep God first in our lives and how to live unselfishly, okay? And when we live unselfishly, we have better relationships. We have better relationships with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, with our friends, our employers. So it helps us to live unselfishly. Unselfish people just have better relationships, but they also have better finances because they are good stewards of all that God has given them. And they have learned that God is trying to help them prosper over time. Selfish people want their needs met right now. Little babies, when they're hungry, they want to be fed right now. As our kids get bigger and we're cooking supper and they're hungry, we say, you got to wait an hour. It's a good lesson for you. You got to be hungry once in a while. It's important that you learn that lesson. And so just remember that God is trying to teach you how to prosper over time. And no one has ever become poor by giving, ever. You go talk to anybody, even people who aren't Christians, even people who don't believe in God and are not religious. If they give, they have never become poor by giving. I heard Stephen King, share a story about giving and what a difference it's made in his life. Stephen King. I mean, this is a principle, a life principle. So there's an interesting trend in the United States. Are you ready for it? Prepare your heart. Average giving in the U.S. is about 2%. 2%. That's the average giving in the United States. The average people that are at the poverty or below level is 12%. 12% of people live below the poverty line, all right? This is my theory. This is something that I've been contemplating. I wonder what would happen if we increased our giving. If the average giving was at 12%, I wonder what the average below the poverty level would be. I wonder if that would it decrease. But that's just my theory. It's based, though, on personal experience, my faith in God, and Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Because I just believe that God would open the floodgates and he would pour out his blessings upon the people if we were giving. And so we won't really know until enough people are willing to give it a try. All right, so we've talked about what giving is. We've talked about what the tithe is and what offerings are. So now we're just going to talk about the different types of giving, okay? So you know how when you do a new workout and they have different, like they'll show you a new step in the workout. And they'll say, now if you're just a beginner, you have to do the modified step. But if you've been doing it for a while, we want you to do this step. But now if you're advanced, we want you to do this step, okay? So I'm like, I can do the advanced one. I can do that one. I do it a couple times and I'm like, nope, I'm going back to the average one. I do that one a couple times. I'm like, okay, I'm a beginner. I'm going to do the modified. I'm definitely not ready for that. Well, giving is the same way, because if you've never been giving, if you haven't included giving in your life, then you're going to want to start out with the first step. Okay? And the first step is scheduled giving. Giving is scheduled. It's not something that you just do when you feel like it, all right? You plan for it. It's a part of your budget. Those of you that are doing financial peace on Sunday nights, what's the very first thing on the budget? No, on the budget, not the baby steps. What's the first? Giving. When you do your short budget, your quick budget, the very first thing you put in your budget is your giving, okay? So let's just think about that. I have 10 oranges. I didn't want to do 12 because the math's too hard. 10, easy math. So this is 10 oranges, okay? So if I'm budgeting my oranges, my fruits, then I'm going to keep 9 in this basket, and I'm going to set 1 orange aside. And this one's going to be God's orange, okay? I'm going to bring it. Brad and I choose to give our orange to the church. That's how we choose to do it. So this is the church's orange, but it's really God's orange, and God mandates what's done with this orange and how it's spent and what happens to this orange, okay? But look, how many oranges I still have. Okay, but my friend Lindy, she gets hungry. And she doesn't have any oranges, and she really needs an orange. So I'm going to give Lindy an orange. Look how many oranges I still have. Do I still have a lot of oranges? Okay, so that was my offering. This was my tithe. That was my offering, and I still have a lot of oranges. Okay, so every man, Deuteronomy 16:17 says, every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God, which he has given you. But also, here we go, New Testament, 1 Corinthians 16:2 says, on the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. So giving, which is tithing in particular, is a safeguard that God has created for us. When we tithe, we are regularly reminded that all we have really belongs to God. All of it. This whole thing really belongs to God. And I can't take it and squander it and waste it or spend it on ungodly things, because it's really all His, and I just get to manage it and be a steward of it, okay? So I want to honor Him in what I do. So the tithe just reminds me of that, holds me accountable, and keeps me doing that, all right? So when we neglect tithing, we easily slip into thinking about things that we should do with our money. Do you see the problem there? When we start to take ownership and make the money our money. And so when we tithe, we accept His help to manage this money. And listen, I've prayed over my checkbook, and God has helped me to balance it before, and I need His help. There's been times that this and this and this added up to this, and I needed it to be this, and the world's math says there ain't no way. There's no new math for that. But God's power says that that can be whatever He needs it to be, because He adds to it however He chooses. And so I need God's help to manage my money, and I'm going to accept His help. Okay, when we keep God's money and we eat all the oranges, I'm even not really going to right now, but let's say I took my orange back. Well, okay, I'm going to take my orange back from Lindy. These are my oranges, and I'm hungry. Y'all seen my family. You know how much they eat. We're hungry, and we're going to eat all the oranges. The problem with that is I don't have any seeds, okay? When you're a farmer and you harvest, you have to keep part of the harvest to sow again, so that you have another harvest. So when we eat all the oranges, there's nothing for me to sow for future harvest, okay? I've eaten all of it. I've consumed it all, and there's nothing else left. But when I set this one aside and give it to God, I've sown a seed. This orange is full of seeds, and the seeds in this orange will produce far more than one orange. God takes it and He multiplies it. Brian shared a quote with me last night that said, we can look at an apple and count the seeds, but only God can look at the seeds and count the trees, okay? But that's what you've got in this little orange, is you've got seeds and trees for God to multiply. So listen, don't eat all the oranges. Don't do it. This is why taking off the tithe is the first thing you do, because you don't want to eat the harvest. You want to sow seeds for the next harvest, okay? Don't touch it. Take it off first thing. Some people choose to automate their giving, okay? It's a good idea, because then it just happens. It just goes, unless you really want that experience of dancing to the offering box, which is pretty fun. It's pretty fun. So the Bible refers to giving of our first fruits, and this just refers to scheduling your giving. So if you're a beginning giver, schedule your giving. That's your first step. That's the first thing you want to make happen. That's the first thing that Brian and I did in our lives, was we started scheduling our giving, and we gave faithfully. And once we were able to give faithfully, we were astounded at all that God did for us. I can remember when we first moved here to Lighthouse Church, and we bought our little house out on Co-op Road. It had a garage, okay? And it was a big garage, and our vision was that at some point we were going to convert that garage into a dining room, a huge bedroom, and a huge walk-in closet for our girls, because in the house is 3 very smallish bedrooms, okay? But when we first moved there, we had to fit everybody and all of our things in those very smallish bedrooms. And we didn't have a lot of extra to keep back to save for the renovation, but we did save. We did start putting back what we could. And when I would add up how long it was going to take us to be able to do the renovation, I couldn't talk about it because it was so depressing, because it was going to take forever for us to have enough money to finish the garage and convert it into bedrooms for our girls. But that was beside the point. It was my job to be faithful. So we faithfully tithed and we faithfully saved what we could save toward the renovation. And one day, Brian comes into the church like he normally does, usually on a Monday morning, and there was an envelope on his desk addressed to us. And when he opened it, there was a letter that said, "This is to be used to renovate the garage and convert it into additional living space." And when we added what little bit we had saved to that amount, it was exactly to the dollar what we needed to complete the renovation, and our girls now reside in the sister suite. But Katie is getting married soon, and now it's going to be the brother bunk. And the girls are going to move into the small bedrooms. But that's what God does when you are faithful. And so don't be afraid to take the first step and do your scheduled giving, okay? Because it's the most important step. Now, if you've been giving for a while and you're ready to exercise your giving muscles, giving should also be inspired. So we have scheduled giving and we have inspired giving. So let's look at Proverbs 19:17, and it says, "He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given." So when you do something for someone, you don't have to worry about it, because you loan to God, and God's going to take care of it. How many of you have been at a gas station, had someone approach you and ask you for money, and you're not real sure what they're going to do with it? Well, I go ahead and give them what's in my pocket, and I say to them, I look them in the eyes and I say, "This is from the Lord, and you should spend it the way the Lord would want you to spend it." The Lord is giving you this money, so you spend it how the Lord, how he wants you to spend it. And then I just let it go, and I say, you know what? It's between them and the Lord. So you can always provide for other people's needs and be confident in that, because it's between them and the Lord, and it's between you and the Lord. So the best part of abundance is giving. Think about it. The more we give, the more we're given to give away. So I think about the disciples giving away the loaves and the fishes. Remember that story? Brian talked about it not long ago. Imagine them being completely giddy as they went through the first dozen. Imagine. And there's still more to give away. And they gave and they gave and they gave until everybody was satisfied. And then there was tons left over. So next to walking every day at the side of Jesus and seeing him resurrected, this had to be the highlight of their lives on earth. Imagine, that's such a huge thing. So the only real freedom that money offers is when you give it away. That's the only real freedom that money offers. Giving produces freedom 100% of the time. 100%. Freedom from the bondage of things, freedom to receive more from God, and freedom to be the conduit of blessings to others. Christians who have given freely of their time, their money, and themselves are people who have changed eternity for themselves and for countless others. Countless others. Giving is really the only legacy that we leave. See, when we die, we don't get to take anything with us. We don't get to come screeching into heaven bringing all our favorite things. We came in the world naked and we leave the world. They put clothes on our physical body, but we don't even take our physical body with us, thank God. It's okay. I'm okay if I shed my body. It's all good. I like the heavenly body. It suits me good. But we come in naked and we leave and we don't take anything with us. And the only thing we leave is our legacy of giving. What we've done for others, what we've given to others. That's it. When you're gone, your stuff's staying. So giving is the legacy that you are going to leave. And so without fail, people who approach life and with open hands will receive more blessings because they are in a position to do so. When your hands are open, when you are giving, then you are also able to receive. When your fist is tight and you're holding on tight, you're not in a position to give, but you're also not in a position to receive. All right, so we've got scheduled giving, we've got inspired giving, and finally, we have sacrificial giving. This is for the advanced level of givers. This is what you want to build up to, okay? You want to start out with your scheduled giving. You want to be able to add to that with your inspired giving. And then finally, you want to be able to sacrificially give. Luke 21:4 says, "For all of these, out of their abundance, have put in offerings for God. But she, out of her poverty, put in all the livelihood that she had." She gave it all. So it doesn't matter how much you give, the amount that you give, it matters the sacrifice behind your giving, okay? That was sacrificial giving. She gave all. So there's a story that's been passed around for a number of years from the sweet elderly lady who grew up in the 1940s. She grew up in a home with 3 sisters, well, it was her plus 2 sisters, and a widowed mother. And they were poor, but they didn't know that they were poor. And so she shares the story in her older years about one Easter, when she was about 10 years old, the pastor, about a month before Easter, announced to church that they were going to take up a sacrificial offering for a poor family in the community. When the sisters and the mother heard the pastor announce, they sat down to lunch to figure out what they could sacrifice to be able to contribute to the offering. And they made a decision to buy 50 pounds of potatoes so that they could give the entire rest of their grocery budget to the sacrificial offering. Now that's a sacrifice, to commit to eating 50 pounds of potatoes for a month so that you could sacrificially give toward this offering. I mean, I applaud that. That's amazing. But they didn't stop there. They decided to not use their lights at night and to not listen to the radio. Remember, this is 1946. To not listen to the radio so that they could include the savings on their electric bill in their sacrificial giving. And the little girls took it a step further because they took every babysitting job, every housekeeping job, and every yard work job that they could get and do, and they would put that money with their offering. When Easter Sunday came around in 1946, these 3 little girls and their widowed mother had $70 to put into the offering. Now, for you young whippersnappers, that's a lot of money in 1946. What would you say that's the equivalent of today? Maybe $1,000, maybe $700. It's a lot of money, okay? So they divided the money between each of them so that each would put a portion of the offering in whenever the offering plate went around. And so the money was collected, and they were giddy with excitement. They went home, and they had their potato Easter dinner, but they felt so good. They had never felt more rich in their lives than they did when they gave and participated in that sacrificial offering. Well, I bet some of you have already predicted this. In a couple of hours, the pastor came and knocked on the door and talked to the mother. And when the mother came back into the kitchen, she had an envelope in her hand. And she opened the envelope, and she put $87 on the table. And the little girls were devastated because they didn't know they were poor. They didn't know that they were the poor family that the church would collect for. They never felt poor. So they didn't talk about it. They went about their week. They didn't talk a lot during the week. And Saturday rolled around, and the mom called a meeting, and she said, "What are we going to do with this money?" And the little girls were heartsick. They didn't want to do anything with the money. So the mom said, "Well, let's just keep praying about it." On Sunday morning, they go to church, and there's a guest missionary speaker for that Sunday. And he shares how that in Africa, they're building churches out of sun-baked bricks. And they can do that for free. Free labor, free materials. But roofs to go on the churches cost money. And for $100, you can put a roof on a church in Africa. And the minister asked if the people would consider sacrificially giving to provide roofs for churches in Africa. And the little girls, Mom, and they got the $87 out and they put it into the offering and they collected over $100 to put a roof on the church. And the missionary said, I never dreamed a congregation this small in 1946. He didn't say that part, I'm just reminding you. Could take up an offering that much to be able to provide this roof. You must have some really rich families in your church. And the little girls and the mom went to lunch and talked about how they were that rich family. They were the rich family that gave the money that paid for the roof for the church. And so it's all in your perspective. How you view money, how you approach wealth, how you approach your finances, it is all in your perspective. We have one more short video clip that we want to share with you that just kind of brings it back home, if they'll play that for me.
Mi papá gana $20 a la semana. Esta es mi clase y somos 20 alumnos.
Yo vivo aquí con mi mamá, con 3 hermanos y 5 hermanas.
Through compassion. I met Jesus. I met Jesus.
I met Jesus, and now
I'm not broke.
I'm not poor.
I am not alone.
I'm not desperate.
I'm strong. I am safe.
I am loved.
I am smart.
I'm special.
I know peace.
I have love. I have Jesus.
I have Jesus.
I have Jesus, and I am not broke. I am not broke. I do not live in poverty. I do not have to live under the poverty mentality. I do not have to make decisions on my life based on how much money I have or how much money that I don't have, because I have Jesus and I am not broke. And if you have Jesus, you are not broke. You get to make a decision with His power behind your decision. Become a generous giving person because you believe that you have Jesus and you are not broke.